All right, Hillary, she can't seem to move on from her election loss in 2016. This past weekend, commencement speech at Yale University. These poor kids have already been indoctrinated. Clinton just really embarrassed herself yet again. It's cringeworthy.
I see, looking out at you, that you are following the tradition of over-the-top hats. So I brought a hat, too. A Russian hat. Right? Look, I mean, if you can't beat them, join them.
Hillary, you're still the loser. And number two, Hillary, you paid for Russian government lies. Christopher Steele funneled money, Fusion GPS, and they turned out to be false. Even in the interrogatories, Steele said,
Good evening from Washington. I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle. Tonight, so many big stories to share with you. I wish I had a second hour. Do we have that, Tommy? No, we don't. President Trump goes on offense against the Mueller team. Wow. The DOJ agrees to his demands to investigate whether the Obama administration spied on his campaign. Carter Page is here to describe what it was like to be targeted by an FBI informant. Meanwhile, Trump goes to war with John Brennan, suggesting Obama's CIA chief began the entire Russia witch hunt because of politics. Plus, we have a stunning report on the immigration crisis. No one talks about this. Chain migration, it's a nightmare. The head of Customs and Border Protection is here to reveal the startling new numbers and the absurd and obscene charges against his bureau as well. And Raymond Arroyo will be here to break down the media's, speaking of absurd, let's say ridiculous coverage of the royal wedding. Ready your tea and scones, people. But first, I spy with my little eye something crooked at the FBI. That's the focus of tonight's angle. On Sunday, President Trump had had enough. He pointedly tweeted, "I hereby demand, and will do so officially tomorrow, that the Department of Justice look into whether or not the FBI, DOJ infiltrated or surveilled the Trump campaign for political purposes, and if any such demands or requests were made by people within the Obama administration." Well, Trump has good spidey sense. This is nothing new in a way. On March 4th, 2017, more than a year ago, President Trump contended that his phones were tapped just prior to the election. And of course, the Get Trump media and the deep state all dismissed it. It was all a bunch of nonsense. Well, of course, we now know that the Justice Department sought and secured permission to surveil Trump advisor Carter Page, whom you'll hear from in just a moment. The problem was that the 2016 Page FISA warrant was obtained in part using fraudulent information from that infamous Steele dossier paid for by the Clinton campaign. Now, again, reset your brain for a moment. Think about that. In the middle of a presidential election, when a man who's running for president is vowing to drain the swamp, there could have been a plot hatched at the senior levels of our government to entrap secondary figures in the Trump campaign to ultimately get to Donald Trump himself. Then those figures were targeted and surveilled, again, even possibly Trump himself. Well, of course, Democrats laughed all this off as spurious.
This claim by the president, the suggestion by Giuliani that there is a political spy embedded in the Trump campaign is nonsense. And you hear it in the same terms that Trump often speaks, which is people are saying, or I'm hearing, or we're being told. That's another way of saying this is patently untrue, but we would like to spread it anyway. And it's singularly destructive of our institutions, but then that's the point.
No, Congressman Schiff, the point is, day by day, we learn more information that seems to indicate that the government may have used its prosecutorial and investigative powers for a political end. To do what? Well, to stop candidate Trump. And when that failed, to derail his presidency. This is the deep state in action. I think it's really unwise to dismiss out of hand the notion that the FBI could have found it within itself to spy on the Trump campaign. Oh, they never would have done that. Well, as the Federalist David Harsanyi reminds us, John Brennan spied on the legislative branch and lied about it to the American people. James Clapper spied on the American people through a domestic surveillance program and lied about it to Congress. And although the Obama administration never tweeted any nasty attacks on journalists, it did spy on and prosecute them. It's completely plausible, then, that those in the upper echelon of law enforcement saw Trump as a threat, then used wobbly evidence as the pretext to investigate his campaign. Close quote. It's a great piece, by the way. For more than a year now, the president and the House Intel Committee, led by Devin Nunes, has sought the initial unredacted documents that sparked this collusion probe. Well, today, the FBI director and the deputy AG have agreed to give congressional members access to highly classified documents about the Russia probe. Now they want to see the information concerning the FBI informant, who reportedly cozied up to at least 3 Trump associates. Now, whether you call this guy a spy or an informant or just a mole, who cares? That's just semantics. According to reports, the FBI sent this informant out to make contact with Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, and Sam Clovis. Now, this informant reportedly had a sit-down with Carter Page in early July of 2016. Well, that's interesting, because that undermines former FBI Director Jim Comey's contention that the FBI didn't begin its investigation until late July. Incidentally, between 2012 and all the way up to 2018 now, according to public records, this same informant received more than $1 million for kind of general foreign policy research. And he conducted this all through the Department of Defense. Another interesting point. Well, it's all very fishy. Come on. Many questions remain about this, and they're unanswered. Today, following that White House meeting, the president said he has been able to get the Justice Department to authorize another Inspector General probe into these spy allegations. Well, the problem with referring this investigation to the Inspector General, as good of a guy as he has no prosecutorial or official subpoena powers. So even if he does find rank abuse by Obama officials, or perhaps, who knows, even Obama himself, if he knew about it, the Inspector General will only be able to refer that information to the Justice Department. What good does that end up doing? Well, the president and all of us do have a right to know the names of any and all Americans who were surveilled as part of this anti-Trump hit squad over at the DOJ. And when we finally get to the bottom of all this, we should have the names of any officials, current or former, who were part of what I believe was an obscene abuse of power. They should be held accountable, all of them, to the fullest extent of the law. And of course, the $64,000 question is, who else in the Obama administration, other than Jim Comey, the other people who've already been identified, signed off on this, approved of this? How much did Attorney General Loretta Lynch know about Crossfire Hurricane? And yeah, while there is historical distance between the White House and the DOJ on ongoing cases, kind of independence, you think about it, it kind of is unfathomable that Jim Comey and company would conduct an operation like this one without at least informing the President of the United States, of course, then Barack Obama. As long as these questions hang out there, I really believe that Americans, more and more of them, are going to think that our government tried, and maybe is still trying, to pull off a political coup against the anti-establishment figure, Donald Trump. And that's the angle. All right, joining us now for reaction is the aforementioned Carter Page, a former Trump campaign advisor whom the FBI surveilled, as well as Michael Caputo, a former Trump campaign aide who has been interviewed by special counsel Robert Mueller's team. Gentlemen, it's great to have you both on tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Carter, let's start with you. You had a lot of contact with this informant, whatever we want to call him, informant, spy, mole. And I want to read one of the emails that he sent to you that was released by, I think it was Daily Caller, got this initially. Dear Carter, I thought I'd write as the summer wears on to ask how you are and what your plans are at this point. It seems attention has shifted a bit from the collusion investigation to the contempt, of course he misspelled it, within the White House, and how or if Mr. Scaramucci will be accommodated there. I must assume this gives you some relief. We're here in Virginia, et cetera, et cetera. Be in touch when you have the time. Would be great to catch up. We're not mentioning the informant's name, but Carter, when did you first meet this informant that we now know as an informant? And just briefly tell us about that exchange.
Well, again, similar to you in terms of being cautious about identity, I have also, I never knew anything about the person I was speaking with, who's a university professor at Cambridge in the UK at the time. I was invited to participate in a conference in July of 2016, and everything seemed totally normal. So, and frankly, I've been falsely accused myself, and we'll see what happens in terms of, as further details come out. But based on everything I've seen thus far, we still don't have any information. So there's been a lot of
we know he was paid $1 million over 5 years, pretty good money, as a consultant or researcher. But you're right. Well, we shall see. But question, Carter, before we go on to Michael, who started the conversation? How did the date begin? Sorry, but did he approach you? Did he mention Russia collusion first? How did it go down?
We had, it was a multi-day conference, and there were scholars and people from government, both from the United Kingdom.
I know, but stay focused with me, Carter. Yeah. Did he approach you first? Did you approach him? How did you first start speaking?
I don't even recall. We spent a couple days together, and there
a couple days together.
Well, yeah, it was a long event over several days, and
right. But there were a lot of scholars. What I'm saying is there were a lot of scholars there, and you have to know the process of grooming someone. When someone is an informant, they don't just go up to someone and say, "Hey, I want to plant information on you or find out what you have." You try to win someone's trust over. That's how it goes.
I never felt groomed. So if he's good at doing that, then perhaps that's part of the game.
But you don't know. Stand here, right? You don't know who mentioned the Russia collusion issue first.
I can't even remember. I think Russia was in the news, and I think, a lot of politics sort of revolves around various news events. And so, these various stories came up. Again, we stayed in touch for over a year. And while
looking back on it, Carter, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're limited time. Looking back on it, does anything seem odd, or just, how you know something now, you're like, oh, maybe that was a little odd, or any other contacts you had with any other people that seem now, in retrospect, given what we know now, odd, out of the ordinary, or maybe in some way improper?
Well, I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt, and we'll see. Maybe this individual who we're talking about might have been a little bit nicer than I might otherwise have expected. Although, we were talking about all of the abuses that were happening with this dodgy dossier, which was first debuted in September 2016 as a way of damaging the Trump campaign and basically destroying myself. And so, and he always seemed very sympathetic about that. So, yeah. Again, we'll see. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. People that know him in Washington, in senior circles that I've spoken with afterwards, say, he seemed like a pretty decent guy. So I give.
That would be the perfect. That would be the perfect person to use for. Maybe I'm just cynical, been around Washington too long. Carter, if only they gave you the benefit of the doubt, like you're giving other people the benefit of the doubt. Michael, let's go to you. You've been through the meat grinder at the Mueller investigation. He has the legal eagles, all these really highly skilled interviewers, prosecutors on his side. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them, I believe, have a built-in animus against Donald Trump. You are very angry that you've been dragged into this as a former associate of Roger Stone. You also did some work for the Trump campaign. Tell us what you think. You just heard what Carter said about this, reported informant for the FBI.
Well, I think Carter's been through more of a meat grinder than I have, and he's handled it as a gentleman. In fact, when I first heard about this stuff, I think in 2016, 2017, about Carter, I wasn't very kind in my criticism, and I think it looks like they were really abusing Carter. I think they were really treating him poorly, and I think a lot of us owe Carter an apology because we didn't wait to hear the truth at the end, and now we're finding out that his country was really failing him for months and months and even years. I'm angry. I'm surprised that Carter's not. He's a greater man than I think. But I'll tell you, this is really sick and twisted stuff. And like Carter said, this gentleman who shall not be named has a reputation of being very pro-America, very patriotic. And if, in fact, he was brought into this under false circumstances or false pretenses as well, he'd be the kind of guy that a deep state would target.
Yeah. Well, the dossier was the basis for getting this FISA warrant. I don't care what these people say. It was all a big lie. Without this dossier, Carter Page would not have been surveilled in the fall of 2016. That would not have happened. That's why they were running to that Russian oligarch, Oleg Deripaska, to try to get him involved. And he's like, I don't even like Paul Manafort. This is ridiculous. So they were doing everything they could. They were working the Page angle. They probably were working this informant angle. And they brought you in, Michael, which we'll get to in a moment. But I want to play for you what Sally Yates, the acting attorney general at the very beginning of the Trump administration, she's the one partly responsible for interviewing Michael Flynn at the beginning, what she said today on Morning Joe. Let's watch.
I think what we're seeing here is the president has just taken his all-out assault on the rule of law to a new level. Mm-hmm. And this time he is ordering up an investigation of the investigators who are examining his own campaign. That's really shocking. Rod Rosenstein is trying to strike a balance here between diffusing this situation, but also protecting the rule of law and the institutional integrity of the department.
Carter Page, as I pointed out in the opening angle, the government under the Obama administration had surveilled people and lied about it. And whether it was Clapper, whether it was the FBI under Holder surveilling journalists, they have a history of having a problem telling the truth on surveillance. So for Sally Yates to run out there and say, oh, well, this Donald Trump's attacking the rule of law, come on, your reaction.
Well, just going to Michael's point about, things they did to me, President Trump during the campaign would often say, this is not about me, this is about us. And I think of all of the terrible things that happened to so many people like Michael, like, some of the other people who were involved allegedly with this informant. I actually, spoke very positively. I got a positive impression about this informant, and a couple of the people I mentioned him to in the campaign, I was a pretty positive endorsement. So I hope and pray that, all these allegations turn out to be false. And part of why I'm somewhat open about my communications with him is that it'll lead to some truth finally from the Department of Justice. I've been asking for DOJ to own up to these things, and it's funny, the defamation suit I have against a top media organization and DOJ. The media organization is actually much more honest than the false pleadings by the DOJ so far.
Right.
So hopefully they clean up.
We got to play this James Clapper for Michael. He's basically just justifying the use of any type of informant here. Let's watch.
The focus here, and as it was with the intelligence community, is not on the campaign per se, but what the Russians were doing to try to instantiate themselves in the campaign or to influence or leverage it. So if there was someone that was observing that sort of thing, well, that's a good thing because the Russians pose a threat to the very basis of our political system.
Michael, so you see a pattern here? Former Obama administration officials justifying spying on, surveilling, whatever you want to call it, putting a mole in on an opposing campaign and a hotly contested election year. Final thoughts.
I'll tell you. You've spent time in Russia. Carter and I both have. In Russia, they call this Siloviki, the national security leadership that secretly spies on the entire citizenry of Russia. And here we are in the United States with our own Siloviki underneath President Obama. Let me tell you something that I know for a fact. This informant, this person that they tried to plan into the campaign and even into the administration, if you believe Axios, he's not the only person that came at the campaign. And the FBI is not the only Obama agency that came at the campaign. I know because they came at me. And I'm looking for clearance from my attorney to reveal this to the public. This is just the beginning. And I'll tell you, when we finally find out the truth about this, Director Clapper and the rest of them are going to be wearing some orange suits.
Michael Caputo and Carter Page, I hope we get to the bottom of this a lot sooner than a lot of people are predicting, because the American people deserve to know who is behind this, who authorized it, and how high up the ladder it went. Thank you both for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Laura.
All right. God bless you both. And a question we'll tackle next. Is the former Obama CIA Director John Brennan spooked? We're going to talk to former intelligence officers about what his recent anti-Trump outburst could reveal about his own skeletons. Coming up. President Trump swore in new CIA Director Gina Haspel today, while also targeting one of her predecessors in a furious war of words on Twitter. It began yesterday when the president demanded that the Justice Department investigate whether the FBI and DOJ infiltrated or surveilled the Trump campaign for political purposes during the Obama administration. Now, former CIA Chief John Brennan called that a, quote, disastrous path and accused Trump of self-serving actions. Well, Trump replied by quoting Dan Bongino on Fox and Friends this morning, who said Brennan is panicking because he's disgraced himself and the entire intel community. Now, Bongino accused Brennan of starting the entire Russia investigation, which he called a political hit job, not an intelligence investigation. So the big question now is, did the intel community under Obama spy on the Trump campaign for political purposes, as I asked in the Angle? Let's discuss that with former NSA intel official William Binney here in the studio with me, and in Boston, former Delta Force officer Jeff Beatty, who was a CIA Counterterror Center case officer and a hostage rescue advisor to the FBI. Great to have both of you on. William, let's start with you. I find this narrative to be so disturbing on so many levels. We go back to the spring of 2016, when on a few occasions, Loretta Lynch could have approved a defensive briefing of the Trump campaign, saying, look, we see your list of advisors, includes this guy, Carter Page, just might want to know, we've been watching him for some time. And she said no. On two occasions, they could have informed the Trump campaign of their concerns. They did not want to do that.
Actually, I think their spying on the campaign goes even before that. I mean, NSA is picking up all the data on them anyway. They have it stored and they can access it to the IC Reach program.
So continue. Continue that thought.
Without any oversight by the intelligence committees or the FISA court. It's all done under Executive Order 12333.
So you're going back to the
okay,
but you're going to the collection of data that the
it's
NSA
all available.
continues, the surveillance program that Clapper, correct me if I'm wrong, Clapper is the one who originally didn't tell the truth about.
Yes, that's right. And also Alexander didn't tell the truth about it either. So when he testified in the Senate saying we didn't collect data on millions or hundreds of millions. Yeah. Well, Keith Alexander.
Okay, I'm sorry, Keith Alexander. I'm like, Marla, what did he have to do with it? Okay, let's stay focused. So we want to stay focused on this current issue, because I want to stay focused on John Brennan, okay? Because John Brennan, back to March 21st of this year, was throwing out all sorts of theories to hurt the president. Let's watch.
Yeah. I think he's afraid of the president of Russia. Why? Well, I think one can speculate as to why. That the Russians may have something on him personally that they could always roll out and make his life more difficult.
Jeff, I heard that. They may have something on Trump that they may roll out in the future. I mean, how does that make the intel community look good when Brennan is on TV speculating that one of our adversaries has information on him when that dossier has been debunked and phony and paid for by Hillary Clinton? I find that watching that again today was outrageous.
It is outrageous. You know, I mean, here you have, well, he's playing to his base. He's no longer a government official. He has a political base, and that's what he's playing to. And I hate to say it, but we could speculate on this. Those are the words of a word I used last week with you, of a propagandist. You know, when you're out there using innuendo and speculation, you're just trying to cast this net out there and trying to roll back, actually, a failure that Brennan suffered. I mean, Brennan has suffered multiple failures at Putin's hand. You know, I mean, as a director of the CIA, you know, there was the Crimea annexation on Brennan's watch. There was the Russian incursion into eastern Ukraine on Brennan's watch. The whole 2016 Russian meddling in the election all happened on Brennan's watch. He failed 4 times. And Putin, and the fourth is, he's failing now because Putin's objective, Putin's been the winner. His objective really wasn't about making Trump the winner of the election. It was about weakening the United States. It was whatever it would take to cause division, to make us less effective, so that we would be not united in opposing the Russian international agenda. And that's been successful. Yeah. And Brennan, once again, is paying into his hand.
Yeah, I mean, I think, didn't China steal our OPM files, Office of Personnel Management files under Obama, too? I mean, and like China's, meanwhile, gobbling up all these properties all around the world. And we're like, Russia, Russia, Russia. I'm sorry. Every time someone says Russia, I say China. I want to play for you. This was Bob Baer, former CIA case officer, is on another network. He said there's no way that Obama would have approved of any political motivation to start an investigation. Let's watch.
The FBI, when it got a lead that Carter Page was possibly a Russian agent, at that point was legally obligated to open an investigation. This is what the FBI does. But I guarantee you the President Obama did not call up the FBI and say, open up a political investigation into Donald Trump. It just did not happen. So he's conflating these two things, a counterintelligence investigation and a political, dirty tricks.
Oh, that's a red herring, though, William. Whether or not he ordered it, the idea that they would put a informant or a mole and not inform the President of the United States? Hold on a second, Jeff. Let's go to you, William, on that.
Well, just think of the Steele dossier. I mean, that involved the FBI, the DOJ, and CIA. And, that kind of relationship only comes to a point at the President. That's the only person that has control of all of them and can tell them all what to do.
Given your vast government experience, intel community, when they lie, when they don't lie, scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the least likely, 10 being the most likely that Obama knew about this investigation.
I would say 10.
Jeff?
Yeah, I would agree that they have to know what's going on. And if they didn't, then they're not doing their job.
Well, let's remember Susan Rice's email to herself, which I mentioned at least once a show. So here it goes. Ready? She writes an email to herself, National Security Advisor, on Inauguration Day, right after noon. So officially Trump is president then, but nevertheless. President Obama began the conversation by stressing his continued commitment to ensuring that every aspect of this issue is handled by the intelligence and law enforcement communities by the book. The president stressed that he's not asking about initiating or instructing anything from a law enforcement perspective. He reiterated that our law enforcement team needs to proceed as it normally would by the book. She mentions by the book 2 times.
Yeah.
Jeff, and then William, and close it out.
Methinks thou dost protest too much. I mean, that's what that smells like.
Who writes an email like that? Who writes an email like that?
Well, nobody. But the other thing that I hope the president does is goes on the offensive. I hope that he's going to go on the offensive. Verbally, that's great, but there are tools at his disposal
like what?
That the president can go on the offensive. Well, you even have civil suits. There are government employees are protected. Hard to sue them because they've been protected by a law Congress passed. However, you have a lot of people here who are not government employees. Christopher Steele. You have peripheral people who you can start putting pressure on the whole opposition to you by going after them possibly civilly.
Yeah.
How about
right,
rewards? Creating a reward system for people
I
who
like
can
that.
really tell us
Former
what
whistleblower.
happened.
Hold on, we're almost out of time. Finally, on that point he just made.
Well, I just think that this is all a Wizard of Oz game. They're trying to cover up the crimes they've been committing, and they're trying to do it and justify it by writing memos that say things that they're not really doing.
By the book. By the book, guys. We're all doing it by the book. William and Jeff, great to see you as always. While the media ignores growing evidence of misdeeds by Russian investigators, they obsess over the British wedding. Stay there. America fought a war to get away from the British monarchy, but culturally, it looks like some are dying to go back. The fawning coverage over this weekend's royal wedding in Windsor ran from the ridiculous to the sublime, but it was mostly just ridiculous. With analysis, I'm joined by New York Times bestselling author, Fox News contributor Raymond Arroyo. Raymond, shocking that.
Well,
you were up early with.
No, I was not up early.
Oh, you were.
And no, I wasn't. The Washington Post said this about the royal wedding coverage.
Yeah.
TV's delectable coverage of the royal wedding created a safe space for dreamers. I was one of those dreamers. I was sleeping.
Wait, you mean dreamers like immigrants?
I guess they mean dreamers who want to go and have a royal romantic wedding. But what I loved about this, after the wedding, I watched the coverage of some of this. That was much more interesting than anything that happened in the wedding, starting with CNN. Watch this.
People are missing the moment. This is this is the beginning of a revolution.
We've had
worldwide.
It'll be all the rage next season.
I have the lunch menu.
Richard Quest breaks in with the lunch menu.
What?
Why is this a
Wait,
revolution?
why is Don Lemon, God bless him, why is he saying it's a worldwide revolution? Because the dress?
I don't know what it was.
By the way, say yes to that dress.
I imagine it was a beautiful dress. She looked beautiful.
People thought it was boring. It was classy. I liked it.
Well, I don't care. And the idea of men sitting around on all these networks
all the men.
pontificating on a woman's
Men
dress.
talking about
Why
the
aren't
veil?
women
It's
talking
not
about
cool.
veils and dresses?
Yeah, every network was the embroidery.
Who cares? Anyway,
who cares? We're such party.
But wait, over on CBS.
It's love, Raymond.
We're going to get to the love revolution.
Okay. All right.
But over at CBS,
Yeah.
Gayle King was focused on the higher thing. She was trying to elevate the audience's eyes and minds. Watch.
Pippa got a lot of attention because everyone was raving about her bottom, and I thought, is that a big bottom? I don't think so. But she got a lot of attention for her bottom that people thought was perfection. Guess that's a matter of opinion. I've seen some big bottoms. I didn't think that was one, but okay.
Oh, boy.
I thought they were going to play the song "Fat Bottom Girls." There, but
when you're doing 8 hours of coverage, you do run out of things to say.
I think they were into the champagne at that. They were drinking a lot of champagne.
NBC,
at the
they were tipping the
That's the only way I'd get
Kathy
through that
Lee
coverage.
and Megyn Kelly were bombed on one of the streets of Windsor. That's what I hear. And then over at. Well, really, it was two networks. This did something to these anchors, Laura.
No.
Being there in Windsor with the royals and the carriage and all of it, it transformed them somehow. And grown men and otherwise brilliant anchors were transformed into fangirls. Watch.
Oh. It was close. It was close to the right moment, but she saw you.
I think I got a little wave. I think I got a little wave.
She heard
a little something.
I just waved. I literally just passed by and I waved, and he looked up and waved.
He looked up and waved.
Did Anderson giggle? I like it when he giggles. That's cute.
But the focus on every bit of flower, on every lay of the dress, it's overkill. It's a wedding.
You enjoy.
I really don't.
Ripping it apart.
Well, I do enjoy. I have to. I admit.
First of all,
I do enjoy ripping it apart.
Next royal wedding, when George gets married, when we're dead, we're gonna be, I hope, in the right place.
So from the home,
remember this.
We'll share the tapioca and do live coverage. There was Bishop Michael Curry, who is the head of the Episcopal Church here in the United States.
Yeah, he was
He offered the sermon, and Christiane Amanpour then interviewed him. And she has never been under a spell like this.
With this, we'll sit down. We got to get you all married.
At one point, I remember you may be thinking that you may have diverged a bit, maybe ad-libbed a bit, and you said something like, you know, we got to get you all married.
I loved his response.
Yeah, well, there was a response. Yeah, she hasn't been this excited since she discovered mail-order brides in Bangladesh. Remember, she did that Love Around the World series.
No one watched it.
But look at the royals. The royals.
No, the faces.
The faces on the royals. We pulled them. Look at some of these faces. They are hilarious.
No, we got to see.
Do we have
the faces?
I could do them for you if you'd like.
No.
They were.
No. Oh no. No, the face. No.
Look. This is during the homily of Michael Curry.
No, Fergie's daughters.
Yeah, they were not happy. But then, Laura, I found the most unfortunate chyron, and I'll leave you with this, which is the lower third descriptor on E. They had Prince Charles and, can you put it up? Camilla Parker Bowles.
That was...
So... From there, I say...
Diana would have enjoyed that.
Goodbye. I'll give you a royal wave, and off you go, my dear. We'll see you on Wednesday.
I'm not talking. You gave me advice on waves before, and that didn't work out so well for me. Raymond Arroyo. No, I just remembered that. No one knows what we're talking about, but you did enjoy the Richard Quest. Oh, my God!
Here's the lunch menu.
He's waving at me.
Well, it beats getting arrested in Central Park. Let's move on.
Shocking numbers on the hidden immigration crisis, but say yes to the draft. No one talks about. Next, stay with us.
We have laws that are the worst anywhere in the world as far as stopping people from coming in. But with that being said, we're down over 40% border crossings. We've been able to do what I think nobody else has been able to do.
That was President Trump talking about the illegal immigration crisis. But there is something you don't often hear about, a legal immigration crisis, thanks to chain migration. The White House has released figures showing that chain migration, check this out, is responsible for 7.8 million immigrants who've come to the United States in the last decade. It's like the size of New York City, right? That's the vast majority of roughly 10.8 million legal immigrants who've come here again since 2008. So chain migration allows newly naturalized citizens to bring in essentially unlimited number of foreign relatives to the country, even often distant relatives. Here to discuss this is Ron Vitiello, Acting Deputy Commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Ron, it's good to see you. Thanks for being in here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So we hear a lot about illegal immigration, but that part of the immigration question, I think a lot of people forget about, that what President Trump has wanted to do from the very beginning, as well as enforce the border we're going to talk about, is to have sensible legal immigration policies that bring in people that are going to really add value to our country.
He certainly renewed the spirit of the men and women in immigration customs enforcement at CBP for us to do more on the border. There is a generous immigration system. But we need to do more on the border, and he's asked also for the loopholes to be closed. So those are really important things that we want to see get done. So
the asylum fraud, how important would that be for you and the men and women on the front lines doing this job every day to get that asylum, those loopholes in that system that allows so many people to come in now and then just, frankly, sadly, disappear?
We have to get to a place where if people come into the country illegally, if they have a due process, that they have that while they're still in custody, so that they're not abusing the system as it is now.
So in other words, they don't flee and never show up for their hearing,
Correct.
Which is what they often do.
Correct. So that's why we're asking for these loopholes to be closed, because we can do more on the border. We are doing better on the border. With this president, we have new wall going in. We have the National Guard deployments.
Tell us about the wall, because I hear conflicting things about the wall, because we heard that the omnibus funded the wall, but then we heard it actually didn't fund the wall, and the president wasn't told the truth about that. Certainly not the wall that he wants.
So we're installing a wall right now, Calexico, California, which is replacing dilapidated fence that was on the border now. So we've got new capability going in there, new capability in Santa Teresa, New Mexico, replacing vehicle fence with border wall. We have projects and planning underway for South Texas and San Diego for replacement in California. So all of those are going to be improved conditions for our agents to work in, a safer border environment, and more technology to go along with it.
You know, I had, over the years, interviewed so many Border Patrol agents and customs agents who were so demoralized because they want to do their job, and they felt like, and I'm not trying to get political here, but under the previous administration, they were kind of being held back, or even sometimes vilified unfairly. Tell me about just the general, you referenced it briefly, but the general mood of the people who have to do this job. And oftentimes, it is not a safe job. It is a very difficult job.
They take enormous risks, and they want to be successful. So the renewed focus on border security has been very important for us. So adding capability, doing better, doing it in a safer environment, and giving what the American people want. They want a safer border. And now we have this opportunity with this president to try to get more of that capability down there so that we can do our jobs.
Tell me what you all need Congress to do. You have Republicans in charge of the House, Republicans in charge of the Senate, and a Republican president who made border enforcement a primary focus of his administration.
So we want him to prioritize investments so that we can add capability. So the border wall system, we're trying to hire agents. We need to do that. And we also need these loopholes closed. We need the loop to be closed on the asylum system. We need to have a way to hold people when they come into the country until their time to be removed, once they have their due process. So if we can do all of those things at the same time, we'll have a much safer border. Fewer people will try to take that dangerous journey. So
Well,
that's what we're asking for.
We have people in Congress now, a number of mostly more moderate liberal Republicans, trying to push a new amnesty. They call it this, there's a technical way of getting a lot of bills on the floor. We don't have to go into it, but would amnesty or the prospect of amnesty at this point, as we approach the summer months, would that make your job easier or more difficult?
I don't believe so. What we need to do is
you don't believe what? Which one?
I don't think
Easier or more difficult?
I don't think it'll make it easier.
Make it more difficult, would it not? Like the summer of 2014, when there was a possibility of amnesty with Boehner and Cantor and all those guys, and you had a big wave of unaccompanied minors crossing the border. Remember that summer? It was
The cartels will look for ways to exploit the way the system is working now. So closing the loopholes and adding the capability in these investments, border wall, the National Guard, giving us more technology on the border, hiring agents, that's what we need to do.
How about the prosecutors at the border? How about the fact that you need these immigration judges down there? Again, they have like 6,000 more personnel, I believe, immigration officials and judges down there. That's what the president, I believe, is getting. But when you have tens of thousands of people crossing in a 3- and 4-week period, I mean, you need more than that, do you not?
So the Justice Department is stepping up. They're adding resources. They went to the 100% prosecution. So the Secretary has directed us to refer all people who cross the border illegally for prosecution. And so we're starting to ramp up those capabilities as well. What we've learned over the years, if you apply a consequence to people when they're doing illegal activity, you'll get less of it.
Yeah, heaven forbid you actually have consequences for illegal activity. Keep us updated, because I think the American people need to hear from you directly. You guys are doing the job.
That's
and
right.
we need to hear from you directly what you need. There's no politics here. What you need to get the job done, period. Will you keep us informed?
Happy to do that.
We really appreciate it. And stay right there, because we have information on school shootings that will absolutely amaze you. We will show you proof that almost everything the major media are telling you about the school shooting epidemic is actually wrong. Go away. Turn on any other network and you'll hear we are in a crisis, experiencing more school shootings than ever before. There's only one thing wrong with that: fact. It's not a fact. The people at the Mises Institute recently took a dispassionate look at the number of school shootings in the 1990s compared to today. What they discovered may shock you. Joining us now from Denver to discuss that is Ryan McMacken, senior editor at the Mises Institute and former aide to Chuck Schumer. Chris Hahn is with us in New York. Great to see both of you. Let's start with you, Ryan. Where are we on this? Because it really is alarming. We have more dead students. We have a town in mourning, 30 miles outside of Houston. We have a lot of politicians who want to do something with gun control or gun safety reform, whatever they're calling it. But what is the truth about the actual numbers here?
Well, of course, you can never be in a position where you say, oh, hey, there's not homicides, no big deal, problem solved. But when people start talking about how there's an epidemic, how there's a crisis, I'm tempted to go and look at the actual data to see if that's true, if we're going to use that as the basis for policy making. And so when we, after the Parkland disaster back in February, we started to see some data that was coming out that started to come to our attention. And some of that came from James Allen Fox at Northeastern University, who has some new research coming out showing, where he counts up all of these gun incidents that took place over the past 25 years or so. And there wasn't evidence to suggest that this is a growing trend. If anything, it shows that the numbers are declining. And at the same time, there was new Justice Department data that came out in November of last year showing that school violence is declining as well. And then just to add additional context to that, this all seems quite plausible when you consider the fact that the FBI annual data on homicides shows that homicides have basically been cut in half since the 1990s. Homicides are much lower now than they were 20 and 30 years ago.
All right, let's go to Chris on this. Chris, any student lost in a horrific shooting is heartbreaking for families, for the entire community. But it is interesting to see how the media are playing this as a, it's a trend. It's something that's going to keep happening, et cetera, et cetera. One thing happened on CNN today. I'm going to play for you. We don't have time to play the full minute clip. I was on MSNBC, excuse me. It was a full minute-long clip of a reporter trying to get baseball players in Santa Fe High School to say something about gun control. This is just one part of it. Let's watch.
We saw the teens in Parkland really become the voices of the movement for gun reform across the country. Now your voices have become all important. How do you feel about that responsibility on your shoulders right now, Trent?
It's just kind of what it is. It's sad that it happens everywhere, but you just kind of got to go through it.
Anyway, the kids, none of the baseball players would kind of take the bait on the question. Which I just found odd to do that. People want to be involved with gun control. They can be involved with gun control, but don't put them well, the other kids are doing this. Well, it's just a little odd. But Chris, what about the numbers question by Ryan's study in the Northeastern study?
So I looked at it, and the study stops in 2013, so we can't really compare to what was happening in the last 5 years from what happened in 2013. And remember, there has been 288 shootings up until today in schools since 2009. That's 57 times more than all the other members of the biggest industrialized countries in the world combined, the G7 combined. So in the United States of America, you are 57 times more likely than all of the other G7 nations in the world to be shot in a school. So what are we doing differently than those schools? Than those other countries? And I think we have more lax gun control in this country, and that's why we're having more shootings, and we have a culture of guns. And I'm not saying that there's a one-size-fit-all solution here, Laura, but I am saying we've got to take a real hard look at how people store their guns and who gets a gun.
Ryan,
well, I just want to note.
Yeah, well, hold on. If it's 2013, if that's right, that's a pretty devastating response. I mean, if it's not up to 2018 or 2017, what's going on with this study?
Well, there's two things we can note here. First of all, the statistic just quoted about there being more than 200 shootings over that time period. Fox actually addressed that in a February USA Today column, where he noted that more than 50% of those shootings were incidents that were just a person who attempted suicide or completed suicide on a campus, or incidents involving a gun where no one was actually shot or injured. So what they've done is they've taken and vastly expanded their definition of what it is to come up with that big number.
For your study?
Well, what was it, 2013, real quick, because we want to continue this real quick.
I would say let's look at the overall homicide data. If we don't have specifics on school shootings, then let's look at homicide. Why is it that we're now...
We'll continue this on radio,
so
guys.
So why are we addressing this tiny
we got to get the numbers and the
do
dates right on this study. We're going to be right back, continuing.